One quiet morning, before the neighborhood had fully woken up, the deep sound of engines rolled into a narrow, dusty street. People looked out through half-open windows. A line of black vehicles had stopped in front of a crumbling one-room house with a rusted roof. Children stopped playing. Women paused in the middle of sweeping their compounds. Then 4 men stepped out. They were dressed in dark suits. Their shoes were polished. Their faces were serious. One of them walked to the door of the old house and knocked twice. When nobody answered, he turned to the neighbors and asked in a calm voice, "Does Adaobi live here?" The entire street went still. Adaobi? The poor cleaner? The girl who had just lost her job 3 days ago? What would men like these want with someone like her? But what nobody in that street knew was this. Adobe's kindness had been seen. Her sacrifice had been counted. And the blind old man she had been feeding in secret was not who he seemed. 10 days earlier, Adobe's day had started the way most of her days started. Too early and too hard. At 4 a.m. she was already awake. Rainwater had dripped into the room all night. She pushed a metal bowl under one leak, then an old plastic bucket under another. The air smelled damp. The walls were cracked. Her mattress was thin. And in the corner of the room, her younger brother, Somto, was still asleep on a mat. Adaobi stood quietly and looked at him. He was only 15. Too young to be worrying about school fees. Too young to notice how many nights his sister went hungry just to make sure he ate. She opened a small tin box hidden inside an old travel bag. She counted the money in it again. Not much, but to her, it meant everything. That was the money she had been saving for her nursing school entrance registration. It was her dream, her one way out. She closed the box and whispered to herself, "Just a little more. I'm almost there." By 5 a.m., she had bathed, dressed in her faded work clothes, and stepped out into the cool morning. Before leaving, she placed a hand on Somto's shoulder. "There's porridge in the pot. Warm it before school." He stirred slightly and nodded without opening his eyes. Adaobi smiled faintly and left. She did not know that before the week would end, the little future she had been building with those tiny savings would be shaken completely. Adaobi worked at a roadside restaurant near the main bus park. It was always busy. Commercial drivers, market women, office workers, travelers. The noise never stopped. Plates clattered. Orders flew from every direction. Oil sizzled. Voices rose and fell. And above all of it was the sharp voice of the owner, Madame Binta. Madame Binta was feared by everyone who worked there. She had one rule: work hard, stay silent, ask no questions. That morning, Adaobi had barely tied her apron when the first rush began. "Adaobi, table 4! Adaobi, carry this tray! Adaobi, wipe that table!" She moved quickly. Her steps were fast. Her face was calm. Customers liked her because she was respectful. She greeted everyone properly. She never argued. She never dragged her feet. Around noon, while balancing 2 bowls of soup on a tray, Adaobi noticed movement near the entrance. An old man was standing outside. His clothes were worn. His shoulders were bent. One of his eyes looked clouded, and the other stayed half-closed. In one hand, he held a walking stick. In the other, an empty food container. He looked weak. He looked hungry. He looked like someone life had already finished with. He did not step inside. He just stood there quietly, waiting, hoping, watching other people eat. Some customers glanced at him, then looked away. Others pretended not to see him. The old man swallowed hard and said in a low voice, "Please, does anyone have a little food to spare?" Adaobi slowed. Her heart tightened. But before she could move, Madame Binta came out from the kitchen area and saw him. Her face changed instantly. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. The old man lowered his head. "I only want something small to eat, madam." Madame Binta let out a short, cold laugh. "Something small to eat? From my business place? So you can chase away paying customers?" "No, madam, I only—" "Get away from here!" The old man did not move quickly enough. Madame Binta grabbed a bowl of dirty dishwater from beside the wash area and threw it at him. The water splashed across his chest and face. Gasps rose around the restaurant. A few people laughed. Others stayed silent. Adaobi froze where she stood. The tray in her hands suddenly felt too heavy. The old man wiped his face slowly. He did not curse. He did not shout. He simply looked up. For one brief moment, his eyes met Adobe's. And in that look there was pain. But there was something else, too. A strange calm, as if he was learning something. Then he turned and walked away. Madame Binta clicked her tongue. "All of you, back to work. This is not a charity center." Adaobi moved again, but nothing inside her felt normal after that. That evening, after closing, Adaobi was walking home with a loaf of day-old bread she had bought cheaply from a roadside stall. The streetlights were dim. Traffic had thinned. That was when she saw him again, the old man. He was sitting near a broken wall beside a mechanic's shop. His walking stick was on the ground. His head was bent low. He looked even weaker than before. Adaobi kept walking for a few seconds. Then she stopped. She looked at the bread in her hand. Then she looked at the man again. Her mind argued with itself. If I give him this, what will Sompto eat in the morning? He may not have eaten all day. I don't even know this man. But if I leave him like this, will I sleep peacefully? She shut her eyes for 1 second. Then she turned back. Slowly, she walked up to him. "Good evening, sir." The old man lifted his head. His voice was quiet. "Good evening, my daughter." Adaobi held out the bread. "Please take this." He looked surprised. "For me?" "Yes." He hesitated before collecting it. "Why are you helping me?" Adaobi took a small breath. "Because no one should be hungry while others are eating in front of them." The old man looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Thank you." She gave a small smile. "It's not much." "To a hungry man," he said softly, "kindness is never small." Adaobi stood there awkwardly for a moment, then said, "I have to go now." "May God remember you," the old man replied. She turned and walked away. But all through the night, even while listening to rain drip through the roof, those words stayed in her mind. The next day, Adaobi tried to focus on work. But sometime before lunch, she found herself glancing toward the road. And sure enough, she saw him again. The old man was sitting beneath a faded umbrella frame near the bus stop. Still waiting, still weak, still alone. When lunch break came, the workers lined up behind the kitchen to collect their food. Stewed beans, rice, a small piece of fish. Adaobi took hers. Then she looked around. Quietly, she wrapped the food and placed it inside a black nylon bag. One of the cooks noticed. "You're not eating here today?" Adaobi forced a smile. "I'll eat later." She waited until everyone was distracted. Then she slipped out the side of the restaurant and hurried across the road. The old man looked up when she approached. "You again," he said. Adaobi knelt slightly and handed him the bag. "Please eat before it gets cold." The old man accepted it slowly. "You are giving me your own food?" Adaobi looked away. "I'll be fine." There was a brief silence. Then he asked, "What is your name?" "Adaobi." He repeated it softly. "Adaobi. And yours, sir?" He paused before answering. "You may call me Babatunde." She nodded. "All right, Babatunde." He gave the faintest smile. "May your life never lack helpers." Adaobi left quickly before anyone would notice she was gone. That became the beginning of a quiet routine. Day after day, during lunch break, she would carry food to Babatunde. Sometimes rice, sometimes beans, sometimes bread and tea when that was all she could afford. Each day he thanked her. Each day he watched her a little more closely. And each day, Adaobi told herself she was only doing what any human being should do. But deep down, she knew that was not true. Not everyone would keep giving when they had so little. In the same restaurant worked another girl named Kemi. Kemi had once been the favorite among the staff. Customers used to ask for her. They used to tip her. They used to smile at her. But since Adaobi had started working there, things had changed. People liked Adobe's humility. They trusted her. And Kemi hated that. She hated the way Madame Binta sometimes praised Adobe's speed. She hated the little tips customers left for her. Most of all, she hated that Adaobi never fought back. Because quiet people are often harder to defeat. One afternoon, Kemi noticed Adaobi hiding her lunch again. Her eyes narrowed. She said nothing, but she started paying attention. The next day, she followed her. From a distance, carefully, silently. She watched Adaobi cross the road. She watched her walk to Babatunde. And then she watched the poor cleaner hand over her food to the blind old man. Kemi smiled, not because it was touching, but because she had found something she could use. 2 days later, when Adaobi reached Babatunde during lunch, she knew something was wrong immediately. He was breathing heavily. His hands trembled. Sweat covered his forehead. "Babatunde, are you all right?" He shook his head weakly. "My body is hot. I have been feeling cold and hot since morning." Adaobi knelt beside him. "Have you taken any medicine?" He gave a tired laugh. "With what money?" Adobe's throat tightened. She looked at the food in her hand. It was no longer enough. This was bigger than hunger now. This was illness. She helped him sit straighter and gave him the food first. Then she rushed back to the restaurant, her thoughts racing. All afternoon, she was distracted. As she served food, only one thought kept repeating in her mind. If I do nothing and something happens to him, will I forgive myself? After work, she did not go straight home. Instead, she returned to Babatunde and found him still there, weaker than before. Can you stand? With help. She took his arm over her shoulder and slowly led him toward a nearby pharmacy. The pharmacist checked his temperature and frowned. He has a serious fever, He needs treatment now. How much? Adaobi asked. The pharmacist named the amount. The sound of it hit her like a stone. It was almost exactly what she had saved for her nursing registration. For one moment, she stood very still. Her mind flashed to the tin box, to her dream, to every extra shift, to every meal skipped, to every coin counted at night. Then she looked at Babatunde. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. Adaobi opened her bag. Her fingers trembled as she brought out the money. "This is all I have," she said. The pharmacist counted it. "It is enough." Adaobi nodded. "Please give him whatever he needs." When the medicine was ready, Babatunde looked at her with deep surprise. "You spent your own savings on me?" She tried to smile. "You need it more than I do." "What were you saving for?" Adaobi hesitated, then answered honestly. "For school." He fell silent. His expression changed. Not with pity, with something deeper, almost like sorrow. Then he said quietly, "Many people give from their abundance. Few give from their future." Adaobi looked away. "Please, just get well." The next morning, Kemi made her move. She waited until the restaurant was full, until the customers were many, until Madame Binta was in her sharpest mood. Then she walked up to her and whispered something into her ear while showing her pictures on her phone. Madame Binta's face darkened immediately. "Adaobi!" she shouted. The whole restaurant went silent. Adaobi turned slowly. "Yes, madam?" "Come here." She stepped forward. Madame Binta raised the phone in her face. It was a picture of her handing food to Babatunde. Another one showed her helping him walk. Another one showed her at the pharmacy counter. "What is this?" Madame Binta demanded. Adaobi swallowed. "Madam, I can explain." "Explain?" Madame Binta said. "So while I am feeding you and paying you, you are taking my food to beggars outside?" "It was my lunch, madam." "Your lunch?" Madame Binta laughed harshly. "And where did that lunch come from?" A few customers lowered their eyes. Others watched shamelessly. Adaobi's voice trembled. "He was sick. He was hungry. I only wanted to help." Madame Binta stepped closer. "So now you want to teach me kindness?" "No, madam." "You want people to say you are good and I am wicked?" Adaobi shook her head quickly. "That's not true." But Kemi spoke from behind, pretending innocence. "I warned her to stop sneaking out, madam." Adaobi turned and looked at her. The betrayal landed fully then. Madame Binta pointed toward the entrance. "Get out." "Madam, please." "Get out before I disgrace you properly." Adaobi dropped to her knees. "Please, madam, my brother is in school. I need this job." Madame Binta's face remained cold. "You should have thought of that before stealing from me." Then she pointed at a bucket near the washing area. "Kemi, bring that water." The moment Adaobi heard those words, fear rushed through her body. She remembered the way Babatunde had been soaked in front of everyone. She stood quickly, picked up her small bag, and backed away. "Madam, I'm sorry. Out!" And so Adaobi ran out of the restaurant. No final salary, no chance to defend herself, no dignity left to hold on to. By the time she reached home, her eyes were swollen. But she did not cry loudly. Some heartbreak is too deep for noise. That night, the rain came harder than usual. Water leaked through the roof in 3 places. Adobe placed bowls around the room while Somto watched silently. He knew something was wrong. "Sister, did they sack you?" She paused, then nodded. Somto looked down. "Was it because of me?" Adobe turned sharply. "No, never say that." "But your school money." She forced a calm voice. "We will survive this first. Then we will talk about school." Somto sat quietly. After a while he asked, "Was helping that old man worth it?" The question pierced her, not because it was cruel, but because it came from fear. Adobe sat down beside him. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she answered slowly, "I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I know this. If I had turned my back on him, I would have become someone I never want to be." Somto leaned against her shoulder. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, the room smelled of wet cement and struggle. The next 3 days were difficult. Adobe searched for work. Shops turned her away. Hotels said they were not hiring. 2 women promised to call her and never did. Her money was gone. Her future looked blurred. And to make matters worse, Babatunde had disappeared. She checked the bus stop, the mechanic wall, the roadside bench. He was nowhere. At night, she wondered if he had recovered, or if something worse had happened. She would never know. Or so she thought. On the 4th morning, Adobe left home early to ask at a bakery about work. That was when the convoy arrived at her street. 3 black SUVs, 1 silver escort car, men in suits. The neighbors nearly lost their minds. By the time Adobe returned, a crowd had formed near her compound. Everyone turned to stare at her. One of the suited men stepped forward. "Are you Adobe?" She froze. "Yes." He reached into an inside pocket and brought out a sealed, cream-colored envelope. "Our chairman requests your presence." Adobe did not collect it immediately. "My presence? Why?" "Please open it." Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Inside was a formal invitation card. No threats, no accusation. Just a request for her to attend a private estate outside the city. At the bottom was a gold crest. She frowned. "I don't understand." The man spoke calmly. "You have nothing to fear. We are here to escort you." Her neighbor, Mama Ifioma, stepped closer and whispered, "Do not go anywhere if you are not sure." The man seemed to understand the fear on Adobe's face. He showed his identification. Then he said gently, "Our employer has been looking for you." Adobe's pulse raced. Her mind ran through every possibility. Had Babatunde died? Was she in trouble for buying medicine? Had she unknowingly helped the wrong person? Still confused, she went inside, changed into her cleanest dress, and returned. Before entering the vehicle, she looked at Somto. "If I am not back before evening, go to Mama Ifioma." He nodded nervously. Then Adobe stepped into the SUV. The drive was long enough for fear to grow, long enough for hope to feel foolish. Eventually, the convoy passed through a large gate into an estate so beautiful Adobe almost forgot to breathe. Tall trees lined the path. Fountains shimmered in the sunlight. Uniformed guards stood at attention. The house itself looked less like a home and more like a palace. When the car stopped, one of the men opened her door. "This way." Adobe followed them through a wide hall and into a richly furnished reception room. Then she stopped. An elderly man was seated in an armchair near the window. He wore an elegant native robe. His beard was neatly groomed, his posture was straight. And though his expression was gentle, his presence carried unmistakable authority. Adaobi stared. Her lips parted. It was Babatunde. But not the Babatunde she knew. Not the hungry old man by the roadside. Not the weak, half-blind stranger in torn clothes. This was someone else entirely. He looked at her and smiled softly. "Welcome, Adaobi." She took one uncertain step back. "What is this?" The old man gestured to a chair. "Please sit. You deserve the truth." Adaobi remained standing for a moment, then slowly sat down. Her heart was pounding. The old man folded his hands. "My name is Chief Daniel Okoye." She said nothing. He continued. "The man you knew as Babatunde was a disguise." Adaobi blinked. "A disguise?" "Yes." He paused. "My wife died 3 years ago. Before she passed, she told me something I have never forgotten. She said, 'A person's true heart is only revealed by how they treat someone who can give them nothing.'" He looked directly at her. "I wanted to know if such hearts still existed." Adaobi's voice came out low. "So you pretended to be poor?" "Yes." "And blind?" "Partly. One eye is truly damaged, but the weakness, the hunger, the helplessness, those were all part of the test." Adaobi leaned back slowly, trying to take it in. Chief Okoye continued. "I visited different places, different towns, different businesses. I was insulted, ignored, mocked, pushed aside. But then I met you." He took a breath. "You fed me when you were hungry. You returned when you had no reason to return. You bought medicine with money you had saved for your future. And you did it all without knowing my name, my status, or what I could do for you." Adaobi looked down. "I was only doing what felt right." The chief smiled sadly. "That is exactly why you are here." Chief Okoye leaned forward. "I have a foundation. It funds schools, clinics, and widows' support programs across several communities. But I have grown tired of people who speak of service while worshiping power." He let the words settle. "I need people with character around me. People who understand pain. People who have mercy." Adaobi listened silently. Then the chief said something she did not expect. "I want to sponsor your nursing education." Her head lifted instantly. He continued before she could speak. "Not only that, I want your brother's schooling fully covered. I want your house repaired or replaced. And if you are willing, I want you to train under the outreach arm of my foundation while you study." Adaobi stared at him in shock. "That is too much." "It is not enough," he replied. "No, sir, Chief, I did not help you for any reward." "I know," he said. "That is why you deserve one." Tears began to gather in her eyes. Chief Okoye's voice softened. "There is one more thing. My son is returning from the United States next week. He is a doctor. He will be taking charge of our new community health initiative. I have told him about you, not as some arranged idea, not as a favor, but as a human being worth knowing. Whether friendship comes from that or simply work, time will decide. No pressure, no force." Adaobi lowered her eyes again. "All of this still feels unreal." The chief nodded. "It felt unreal to me too, the day I realized kindness had not died. She wiped her tears. May I ask one question? Of course. Why me? He answered without hesitation. Because when the world gave you every reason to become hard, you remained soft in the places that matter. That same week, Adaobi and Somto were moved into a clean two-bedroom bungalow owned by the foundation. The leaking roof was gone. The damp walls were gone. For the first time in years, Adaobi slept without placing buckets around the room. She cried that night. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. The way people cry when relief finally enters a life that has known too much strain. Somto could hardly believe it. He walked from room to room, touching everything like it might disappear. Sister, is this really ours? Adaobi smiled through tears. For now, yes. A few days later, she was taken to the nursing college to complete her registration. The same future she thought she had lost had returned to her, only larger, only brighter, only with witnesses now. Chief Okoye kept his word, but that was not the end of the story, because 1 week later, his son arrived. His name was Dr. Malik Okoye. He was tall, composed, and far less proud than Adaobi expected a wealthy man's son to be. When they first met in the Foundation's medical outreach office, he greeted her simply. So you are Adaobi? She nodded politely. And you are Dr. Malik? He smiled. My father has spoken about you so often that I felt I already knew you. Adaobi did not know what to say to that, so she simply replied, I hope he told you the truth. Malik gave a small laugh. He told me you spent your school money on a stranger. That either means you are very kind or very stubborn. For some people, Adaobi said, those are the same thing. That answer made him smile properly. In the days that followed, they worked together during outreach visits. Adaobi helped organize medicine lines. She took names. She comforted mothers. She translated for elderly women who were afraid of the doctors. Malik watched her quietly. Not in a dramatic way, not like a man already in love, but like a man noticing depth, the kind that cannot be faked. One afternoon after a village clinic event, Malik found her stacking empty boxes into a supply van. You don't have to do that yourself, he said. Adaobi kept working. I'm used to doing things myself. Yes, he said gently. I can see that. She paused. Then he stepped closer and lowered his voice. Can I ask you something? She looked at him. What? When you helped my father, were you never angry? After everything he put you through? Adaobi thought about it, then answered carefully. I was angry at the cruelty around him, not at him. Suffering changes how a person looks. It should not change whether they deserve compassion. Malik was quiet for several seconds. Then he said, No wonder he trusts you. Meanwhile, word began to spread. People from Adaobi's old neighborhood heard what had happened. Some did not believe it. Some believed it and envied her. And some remembered every cruel thing they had done when she was still poor. Even at the restaurant, the story reached Madame Binta. At first, she dismissed it. But when one of her suppliers confirmed that the same beggar had actually been Chief Okoye, her body went cold. Kemi panicked too. The two women who had once laughed at kindness now feared what kindness had become. Not revenge, proof. A few days later, Chief Okoye visited the market area for a public foundation launch. Madame Binta was there among the crowd. Kemi stood behind her. When Adaobi stepped out of the vehicle beside the chief, dressed neatly and confidently, a murmur moved through the entire place. Madame Binta lowered her eyes. She could not meet Adobe's gaze. Kemi looked like she wanted the ground to open. Chief Okoye noticed them. He said nothing. He did not need to. Adaobi saw them too, and for a brief moment, everyone wondered what she would do. Would she embarrass them? Would she remind them of what they did? Would she finally return the shame they once gave her? But Adaobi simply bowed her head once in greeting. Nothing more. No insult, no bitterness, no performance. And somehow, that silence was heavier than any revenge could have been. Later, Malik asked her why she had stayed so calm. Adaobi answered, "Peace is expensive. I have paid too much to lose it now." Malik looked at her with open admiration. Weeks passed. Adaobi adjusted to school and foundation work. Her confidence grew. She still spoke gently. She still moved with humility. But she no longer carried herself like someone waiting for life to reject her. Malik and Adaobi spent more time together. At first, it was always work. Planning mobile clinics, reviewing supply lists, discussing villages with the greatest need. Then it became longer conversations. He asked about her childhood. She asked about his medical training abroad. He told her he had once considered remaining in America. She told him some people survive by leaving, and others survive by staying. He liked the way her mind worked. She liked that he listened fully before speaking. One evening, after a long day, they sat under a tree in the chief's compound while the wind moved softly through the leaves. Malik turned to her. "My father was right about one thing." Adaobi looked at him. "What is that?" "That a good heart is rare." She smiled slightly. "And what if a good heart is just a tired heart that refused to become evil?" Malik laughed quietly. "Then that may be even more valuable." For the first time, Adaobi felt something shift. Not pressure, not obligation, but possibility. One afternoon, Chief Okoye called Adaobi to speak privately. She entered his study respectfully. "You sent for me, sir?" He nodded for her to sit. Then he asked, "Are you happy?" Adaobi thought about the question carefully. Then she answered, "I am still healing, but yes, I think I am beginning to be happy." The chief smiled. "That is enough for now." He studied her for a moment and then said, "You know, many people think wealth changes a person's worth. It does not. It only changes who pretends to see it." Adaobi listened. "When you were poor," he continued, "the world priced you cheaply. But your value did not increase because you entered this house. It was always there. The difference is that now the world has been forced to notice." Adaobi's eyes filled again. She nodded slowly. "I understand." "No," he said softly. "You are still learning. One day you will understand fully." She lowered her head. "Thank you for giving me a chance." "I did not give you your character," he replied. "I only responded to it." Not long after, Malik asked if he could speak with her alone. They walked through the clinic garden in the late evening. Lanterns glowed softly around them. The air was cool. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Malik stopped walking. "Adaobi, there is something I want to say." She turned to face him. He took a breath. "When my father first told me about you, I thought he was simply impressed by your kindness. But after knowing you myself, I see much more than that." Adaobi stayed quiet. Malik continued. "You are strong without being proud, compassionate without being weak, honest even when honesty costs you something." He held her gaze. "And I would like to know whether what is growing between us is something you feel too." Adaobi felt her heartbeat rise. She looked down briefly, then back at him. "What if I am still learning how to receive good things?" "Then," Malik said gently, "I will be patient." She smiled, a real smile, soft and unguarded. "I do feel something," she admitted. Malik's expression brightened. "That is enough for me." He did not rush toward her. He did not make dramatic promises. He simply stood there, grateful. And that alone made Adaobi trust him more. Months later, Adobe's life had changed in ways she once would not have dared imagine. Somto was thriving in school. Her nursing studies were going well. The Foundation's women's health program had grown stronger under Malik's leadership, with Adaobi becoming one of its most trusted field coordinators. And in time, what began as respect between Adaobi and Malik deepened into love. When Chief Okoye saw the way they looked at each other, he smiled the quiet smile of a man whose prayer had been answered in a way he never expected. One evening, during a family dinner, he raised a glass and said, "There are people who inherit wealth. There are people who inherit titles. But the rarest inheritance is a good name. Adaobi, you brought that into this house yourself." Adaobi lowered her eyes, overwhelmed. Malik reached gently for her hand beneath the table. And for the first time in many years, Adaobi no longer felt like a girl surviving from one storm to the next. She felt chosen. Not because she was rich, not because she was rescued, but because in a cruel world, she had remained kind long enough for kindness to find its way back to her. And so, Adaobi's story reminds us of something powerful. Kindness does not always pay immediately. Sometimes it costs. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it even appears to destroy the little you have left. But true kindness is never wasted. A compassionate heart may be ignored by people. It may be mocked. It may even be punished for a season. But in the end, character has a way of speaking louder than status. Adaobi helped a man she believed could do nothing for her. And that single decision opened a door no struggle could have forced open. What do you think about Adaobi's story? Was her sacrifice too risky? Or would you have done the same in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more emotional African stories like this one. Thank you so much for watching.